It's Wednesday, February the 6th, and this is The Drill. Thank you very much. This is Ron, your host, the only true conservative in the United States of America today, because I'm the only one that makes the presumption for the status quo. Huh, that's interesting. Anyways, so you and I have been brainwashed. We've been brainwashed into believing we're conservative, when in reality we are reactionary. Decades ago, the Democrats, with the acquiescence of Republicans, set the table, politically speaking, by deliberately redefining political identity. The Democrats decided that one's positions on the issues are what define the political parties. Naturally, Democrats decided that what the issue should be. The news departments reinforced this decision, and the Republicans paid the consequences. The Democrats created an action-reaction political dynamic, with Republicans playing the role of reactionary. In reality, voters are either left or right as a matter of fact, not a matter of opinion. The most essential political fact of reality is change. You and I are defined by our attitudes about change. Change is indicated when there's an improvement to the status quo. Unless there's something obviously better than what we have now, we stay the course. That's realistic. And let's see, constant change in the blind search for perfection is idealistic, liberal, socialist. Defining voters by the issues turns everything on its head. Progress and moving forward take precedence over common sense. Change, not because it's better, but for the sake of change. Act first, think later, trial and error. As a result of issues-based politics, Republicans have become reflexively rigid and resist change for the sake of resisting change. We become caught in a trap of constantly reacting to liberals and socialists and unable to promote values. Talk show hosts have fallen into the reactionary trap of promoting opinion instead of values. The right talks and thinks only about political tactics and techniques, and really talks only about the left and what the left is up to and what the left is thinking and what the left is doing, while American culture is ignored. This gets things backwards. If we concentrate on shaping our culture, the politics will follow. The political landscape today is the result of years and even decades of cultural influence, mainly by the left. Being conservative starts by asking questions, challenging the left's assumptions, and saying no. Being conservative isn't about standing athwart history and yelling stop. It's about standing athwart history and yelling prove it. Not fearing change, but not worshiping it either. Respecting the status quo, thinking first rather than acting first, and subordinating might to right. So I wanted to note, I had put on a little clip from Liz Wheeler yesterday, and I wanted to note that there's the two biggest mistakes that the conservative pundits make, Rush Limbaugh, Sean Hannity, Liz Wheeler et al., is number one, that they react. They're reactionary. And it's like I said in this little introduction here, because this introduction is basically telling you what this show is all about, the influence of philosophy on our culture and the influence of our culture on our politics. And the the pundits have been influenced to be reactionary, to validate the left and validate whatever it is that the left wants or says or hopes for. So that's exactly what, again, as I said yesterday, that Liz Wheeler was doing. The second thing that, let's see here, where is it? Where? There we go. Always predictions. That you're going to hear from the right is constantly making predictions. Everybody makes predictions. Every show I listen to, sports shows, and I suppose it's more appropriate with a sports show. But if you listen to Rush Limbaugh, Sean Hannity, Glenn Beck, Liz Wheeler, any of the Republican pundits, and they're constantly making predictions. I predict this, I predict that, I predict the other thing. And prediction making is, to use an Ayn Rand phrase, an anti-concept. Anti-concepts are used to obliterate legitimate concepts. The legitimate concept here being obliterated is ethics. Because you see, it's really not about what you think is going to happen. It's really about what do you think should happen. There used to be a statement that used to go around, particularly in 12-step programs. And when you hear somebody say should, then you say, oh, you're shoulding on yourself. It was a very little clever turn of phrase, but what it was designed to do is to shut you up and get you to quit saying using the word should. Because when you get right down to it, ethics is all about one word, and that's the word should. What should I do in any given situation? And this is a question we ask ourselves dozens, hundreds, maybe thousands of times every day, from the time the alarm clock goes off until we go to bed at night. And so that's what ethics is all about. What should I do? So when you hear people that are making predictions, what they're simply doing is avoiding ethics. They're avoiding making moral judgments. That's not conservative. That's wrong. Let the left make predictions. If the left wants to go ahead and try to pretend that there are no ethics, that there are no morals, let them do so. But that doesn't mean we should follow them. Okay, they are not leaders. They are not change agents, even if they like to pretend that they are. So, don't, like I said, don't let them lead. But that's the two biggest mistakes that the pundits make. And so when you listen to their shows, listen for that. Listen, number one, what is the overall theme or subject matter of the show? And most times, 99.9% of the time, the subject matter of the show is going to be the left. What the left says, what the left does, the left. Donald Trump gets elected. It isn't about, yay, Donald Trump got elected and that's fantastic, and what can we expect from Donald Trump? What do we expect from the president? What is he going to do? When is he going to do it? Who are going to be his cabinet members? No. The first thing that Sean Hannity and Rush Limbaugh did was start worrying about what the left is doing. What does the left have to say about Donald Trump's election? What are they doing about it? Oh, they're throwing temper tantrums, and they're crying, and they're gnashing their teeth. And then they have to go and explain all of this stuff. No, screw it. Who cares what they're doing? Who cares what they're saying? Because 99.9% of what they do is psychologistic anyhow. It's imaginary. They're bluffers. Who cares what they say? Who cares what they think? Quit allowing the left to push you around. You don't have to. So when I come back, I'm going to be reading from I'm reading the concept of the day from Ayn Rand lexicon, and then I've got a little bit more from the book by Ben Shapiro about the left-wing bullies. Thank you very much. Welcome back. And the concept du jour from the Ayn Rand lexicon is evil. Evil, the standard of value of the objectivist ethics. The standard by which one judges what is good or evil is man's life, or that which is required for man's survival qua man. Since reason is man's basic means of survival, that which is proper to the life of a rational being is the good, and that which negates, opposes, or destroys it is the evil. Thinking is man's only basic virtue from which all others proceed, and his basic vice, the source of all his evils, is that nameless act which all of you practice but struggle never to admit, the act of blanking out, the willful suspension of one's consciousness, the refusal to think, not blindness, but the refusal to see, not ignorance, but the refusal to know. It is the act of unfocusing your mind and inducing an inner fog to escape the responsibility of judgment, on the unstated premise that a thing will not exist if only you refuse to identify it, that A will not be A so long as you do not pronounce the verdict, it is. Evil, not value, is an absence and a negation. Evil is impotent and has no power but that which we let it extort from us. Very, very important right there. I saw that evil was important, that evil was the irrational, the blind, the anti-real, and that the only weapon of its triumph was the willingness of the good to serve it. The spread of evil is a symptom of a vacuum. Whenever evil wins, it is only by default, by the moral failure of those who evade the fact that there can be no compromise on basic principles. Also important. In any compromise between good, food, and poison, it is only death that can win. In any compromise between good and evil, it is only evil that can profit. The truly and deliberately evil men are a very small minority. It is the appeaser who unleashes them on mankind. It is the appeaser's intellectual abdication that invites them to take over. When a cultural's dominant trend is geared to irrationality, the thugs win over the appeasers. When intellectual leaders fail to foster the best in mixed, vacillating character of people at large, the thugs are sure to bring out the worst. When the ablest men turn into cowards, the average men turn into brutes. When men reduce their virtues to the approximate, then evil acquires the force of an absolute. When loyalty to an unyielding purpose is dropped by the virtuous, it is picked up by the scoundrels, and you get the indecent spectacle of a cringing, bargaining, traitorous good and a self-righteously uncompromising evil. As a being of volitional consciousness, man knows that he must know his own value in order to maintain his own life. He knows that he has to be right. To be wrong in action means danger to his life. To be wrong in person, to be evil, means to be unfit for existence. No man can survive the moment of pronouncing himself irredeemably evil. Should he do it, his next moment is insanity or suicide. And that was the concept of the day, evil, from the Ayn Rand lexicon. And in some places there, like the ones where I said that she made a especially important point, substitute the word socialist for the word evil, and you pretty much sum up the state of affairs in the United States of America today. So, let me get rid of something there. Darn it. There we go. And so when I come back, I'm going to be reading from the Ben Shapiro book, Bullies. And thank you very much. Welcome back. Bullies by Ben Shapiro, and it's about how the left uses bullying tactics. The left, this is an introduction I'm reading from right now, but it's basically the idea that the left pretends to hate bullies and yet is the biggest bullies. They're the biggest bullies on the block when it gets right down to it. So when I left this, he was just about to get into Andrew Breitbart, and who Andrew Breitbart was. He was a guy that started some kind of an online media, not Media Matters. He was opposed to Media Matters, who was on the left, but he started Breitbart News, I think it was what it ended up being called. And so it was kind of a biography about who he was and how he acted and what he believed and all that. The only part of that bio that I think was kind of relevant was the fact that Andrew Breitbart started out, who's Jewish apparently, started out as a liberal. That when he came out of college and he got his first job in Venice in an ultra liberal cafe called Hal's in Venice, he ended up being bullied by one of his coworkers, and that it was the result of that bullying that changed the direction of his life sociopolitically. So right now, back to the book. Conservatives have allowed liberals to win the culture war because we're generally civil people. When the left says we're uncivil, we tend to shy away from the fight rather than, as Andrew put it, walking toward the fire. That's a huge mistake. A century of civility has brought us a century of liberalism. We're not the thugs here. They are. And it's just like what I always say about the situation. I have nothing to prove as a conservative. Nothing. Ever. to a liberal. Never, ever, ever do I have anything to prove to a socialist or a liberal. They have to prove it to me. The burden of proof is on them. Bullying is the left's go-to tactic. It has become a way of life for them. Leftists think and act like proto-fascists. Control is the key, and control through fear, threat of force, and rhetorical intimidation is the modus operandi. Now, we're not talking about legislation here. All legislation is inherently coercive. It forces somebody to do something. That's not bullying because it takes form via a consent process. And we vote for the clowns who put our laws into place. Now, I argue with Mr. Shapiro here, and he say that he is wrong, and that what he should have said is bad laws coerce people. Good laws that are written are designed to protect people's rights. When we talk about political bullying, we're talking about the bullying of private citizens by government actors, media heavies, Hollywood, and organizational allies outside of government. That sort of bullying creates a climate of fear among Americans, forcing them to abandon cherished principles, back nasty causes, or shut up entirely. And the left relies on that sort of bullying to the exclusion of all other tactics. President Obama is a Chicago thug who threatened during 2008, quote, "If they bring a knife to the fight, we bring a gun," unquote. Obama surrounded himself with the worst sort of hatchet men, guys like Rahm Emanuel, who sent dead fish to political opponents and reportedly accosted unfriendly congressmen naked in the House showers. People like Van Jones, quote, may indeed have deliberately allowed 9/11, people like Van Jones who suggested that the Bush administration, quote, may have indeed deliberately allowed 9/11 to happen, unquote, and who later founded an Obama-associated group called Color of Change, designed to destroy Obama's political opponents. Folks like Robert Gibbs, who said that Obama should have to put his foot on the neck of British Petroleum. During the 2012 campaign, Obama ratcheted it up. As one side reported, Obama was, quote, putting the bully in bully pulpit, unquote. And he opened the White House to other bullies. Andrew Sullivan, the former gay conservative journalist turned radical leftist, suggested that Sarah Palin didn't give birth to her own child, Trig, and that for that, Sullivan earned a White House invitation to a state dinner with Great Britain. Louis C.K., the monotonous comedian most famous for his despicable, vulgar tweets, which we will thankfully not confront until later, went to the White House too and visited with the White House speechwriter Jonathan Favreau. So I'm going to skip the rest because he just goes on to say who else got invited to the White House, and I don't care. It's not just Obama and friends of Obama either. The bullies pervade the left. They come in all shapes and sizes. They're a diverse crowd. They're black and white, Hispanic, Asian, Jewish, and Christian. They're environmentalists and socialists, pacifists, feminists, and they all share an ideology, and they all share a love for grinding their opponents under their heel with absolute lies. They ooze from every green nook and every red cranny. Anti-American bullies portray America as forces for evil in the world, a great maw of global nastiness, chewing up subject populations, usually brown and yellow, on behalf of their corporate overlords. They are, like Senator Dick Durbin, Democrat from Illinois, believers that the American military is filled with Pol Pot knockoffs and Hitler and Stalin fans. They think, like John Kerry, Democrat of Massachusetts, that the military is filled with morons who just couldn't make it in life and instead ended up in the deserts of Iraq. They label America a terrorist nation. Race bullies like Al Sharpton help incite riots ending in murder, trumpet charges against innocent district attorneys, or threaten civil disobedience to small towns in Florida. Groups like the Nation of Islam and the New Black Panthers stand outside polling places with billy clubs, all with the approval of leftist power players like the Eric Holder Department of Justice. Immigration bullies send death threats to Arizona Governor Jan Brewer for enforcing the border, or compare Arizona to the Third Reich. Class bullies like the Occupy Wall Street Neanderthals fling poop and urine while chanting incoherently at the behest of their union paymasters. Government redistributionist bullies like Obama threaten corporations with, quote, the pitchforks, unquote, should the corporations fail to give Obama and his cronies what they want. Feminist bullies call pro-life women traitors to the female gender for not supporting the liberal agenda. Gay activist bullies are perhaps the most vicious of all, destroying careers, outing enemies, and insisting that school children be indoctrinated with homosexual theory. Environmentalist bullies like Obama science czar John Holdren pen books suggesting forced abortion and mandatory sterilization as potential solutions to planetary overcrowding. Secular bullies follow President Obama's lead, ripping religious folks as dark age morons, quote, bitter clingers, unquote, who think God is important only because they're racist and ignorant. Anti-Israel bullies like M.J. Alfred Rosenberg of Media Matters label pro-Israel Jews, quote, Israel firsters, unquote, mirroring the worst attributes of white supremacist rhetoric. Others, like Stephen Walt and John Mearsheimer, write books talking about how the Jews control government with their dirty Hebe money. The bullying strategy couldn't work without a complex public relations, governmental, and astroturfed strategy. And that's precisely what the left has constructed. The old school strategy for the left was easy. Use the government to bully your opponents. President Clinton used the FBI and Department of Justice as his personal enemy fighting force, unleashing them on Republican opponents. Obama has done this too. During the 2008 campaign, Obama minions famously went after Joe the plumber, digging up his tax records illegally after he had the temerity to ask Obama about his tax policy. During the 2012 campaign, Obama ratcheted up such tactics, even as Obama played the victim, asking his supporters to, quote, get Barack's back, quote, unquote. Normally, that's the job of the Secret Service. He targeted private citizens for destruction simply because they opposed him. But all of this is old hat. It's out in the open, and it's easy to spot and fight. So the left has gotten more sophisticated. Where Clinton used the levers of government to target his opponents directly, Obama's strategy is more subtle. He coordinates with his extra-governmental allies to launch devastating attacks on political enemies. It begins inside the White House and the Democrat Party, where anti-conservative strategies are hatched. The White House begins putting out its talking points via groups like the Center for American Progress and David Brock's Media Matters. Those groups put in phone calls and emails to their allies in the mainstream media, people like Ben Smith at BuzzFeed, the crew at MSNBC, Greg Sargent and E.J. Dionne at the Washington Post, Sam Stein and Nico Pitney at the Huffington Post, and Brian Stetler at the New York Times, among others. That's the media strategy, and that's why you'll hear a Greek chorus chanting mantras in unison. War on women, racial profiling, the 1%. Zuma and Maida couldn't conduct the media any better than the Democrat Party does. But the media isn't enough. Liberals need public support, or at least the appearance of public support. That's where Media Matters and its allies in unions across the country play a crucial role. These groups work with other Obama allies to boycott advertisers who have the temerity to spend their money on shows Obama doesn't like. So far, this strategy has resulted in massive astroturfed attacks on Don Imus, Lou Dobbs, Glenn Beck, Rush Limbaugh, Susan G. Komen for The Cure, and the American Legislative Exchange Council. And it won't stop there. Businesses are Alinsky'd, targeted, isolated, destroyed. It doesn't matter that the businesses have nothing to do with politics. If they're spending money on Rush, they have to be smacked around. Individuals, too, are destroyed. If they're backing efforts like Proposition 8 in California, their restaurants should be boycotted, their jobs should be stripped from them, and they should be bullied into submission. Finally, there's the government itself, with the media supposedly creating public outcry, and with Media Matters and friends building fake public outcry to match the media's propagandizing. The perfect loop has been created. Now there's supposed support for legislation. Bring on the Lilly Ledbetter Act, or whatever the latest trial lawyer giveaway is. Knock down the, quote, stand your ground, unquote, laws. Destroy state voter ID laws, or whatever the hot cause of the moment is. It's a wonderful strategy, and it works, so long as the American people remain silent. Incredibly, for the past few decades, the American people have remained silent. That's because they're scared of the left, and rightly so. This isn't to say there aren't bullies on the right, people who want to shut up their political opponents. Power derives from institutions. The right thinks individually, the left thinks institutionally. And so the left wields more power and therefore far more opportunity to bully. And I'm going to leave it right there. Now, in this little last segment here, where he's saying that the right thinks individually, the left thinks institutionally. And the reason that they get away with that is because the right falls into this trap that whenever the left wants to deal with problems, they don't ever phrase the problem in an individual way. They don't say, there's a homeless guy over there. He needs to be, to get some sort of treatment. He needs to be in drug rehab or whatever. He needs to be off the street. Okay, that's an individual problem. They collectivize the problem. They talk about the homeless. Okay, and when you have a debate, let's say on a talk show between a conservative and a liberal, one of the best ways for them to screw up the conservatives, just simply say, what about the poor? What about the homeless? And if the conservative isn't thinking and isn't sharp on his feet, he's going to fall into the trap of assuming that this is a dealing with this problem as a collective problem, and the problem with that is that all collective problems require collective solutions, i.e. government. It requires more government. So when they come out back and they say, what about the homeless? There is no answer for that other than government. That's the only way to deal with the homeless or the poor. So you have to individualize it. And you as an individual, when you have somebody that comes up to you in your life, your friends, your relatives, your coworkers, and pulls this stunt, what about the poor? You have to say, who are you talking about? You mean the guy that was panhandling outside the office today? Or you could ask them, are you poor? Is your mother poor? Who's poor? Who are you talking about when you mean the word poor? And you have to stand your ground and not participate in the conversation until they answer the question. Who are they talking about when you say poor? When they may come back and say, oh, come on, you know what I'm talking about. No, I'm afraid I don't. If I did, I wouldn't be asking who you're talking about. Okay, so why don't we talk about this when you've done a little bit of research or done your homework? Have a nice day and walk away from them. Don't let the left set the table. They rip off conservatives and rip off Republicans every day politically because they set the table decades ago by defining for everybody what is conservative and what is liberal. Misdefining. Saying, well, these are the issues, and where you stand on the issues is where you stand politically. BS. Okay? And the same thing that goes here. Don't let them get away with collectivizing the problem. And you'll hear a lot of talk show hosts doing this. Their third biggest mistake is acquiescing to collectivized problems. Because the only solution for a collective problem is a government solution. So, individualize the problem, and then you're in charge. Once you get down to, hey, how do we deal with the guy outside that's panhandling? They can't win. There's no way they can win, because their whole point is to get you to concede that the government must be used to solve these problems, must be used to solve the problem of the poor or of the homeless. And actually, in reality, it's not true, because every person is poor for different reasons, and they're homeless for different reasons. Each person is an individual, and this is why government programs frequently fail, is because they take a one-size-fits-all approach to problems like homelessness and poverty. We had anti-poverty programs were started in the Great Society era of Lyndon B. Johnson, when he was president in the 60s. And since then, we have spent trillions of dollars. There was somebody that was quoting a figure yesterday on the radio. It was John Cobelt on John and Ken show. And it was at least $3 trillion, but I think it was even more than that. $3 trillion on poverty, and it still hasn't been eradicated. So, like I said, don't allow yourself to be intimidated or bullied by the left. You got to listen to what it is that they say and go from there. But at this point, that brings us to the conclusion of another episode of The Drill. I thank you for listening, and until next time, have a great day.